Good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good morning for folks that are in Pacific time, I guess. Delighted to welcome you this afternoon. We're going to give folks a minute or two to join us for the Public Viewpoint webinar. So thank you for your time and stay with us for just a minute as all participants have a chance to join.
Feel free as you're joining us to put your name and where you're coming from in the chat, maybe so we can see who's here and acknowledge you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nichole, for mentioning that. Much appreciated. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruth Watkins from Strada Education Foundation. We're just giving everyone another minute or two to join us. So thank you very much. Stay with us and please do give us your information in the chat. We'd love to know who all is here with us today, and we welcome you warmly. Seeing that many have had a chance to join us, I'd like to get us started this afternoon. My name is Ruth Watkins. I'm from Strada Education Foundation. Warmest welcome. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today to discuss the value of community colleges, recent students' motivations, and outcomes. I am delighted to tell you this afternoon that we have the privilege of hearing from three remarkable leaders in the field, individuals who have lived experience leading in community colleges. So they know the work very, very well. And they also know the landscape incredibly well, the value, the importance, and the many, many contributions that community colleges make. It is also an incredible opportunity for us to hear student perspectives, alumni perspectives from community colleges, an area that we know much less about than we do many other alumni reports. And that work is being led by Dr. Nichole Torpey-Saboe. So we'll begin today's webinar hearing from Dr. Torpey-Saboe about the results of a research report. And I really want to express my gratitude, particularly for our remarkable leaders from community college expertise and now also from the world of foundations. Pascale Charlot, who is the managing director of the College Excellence Program at the Aspen Institute, Eloy Oakley, president and CEO of the College Futures Foundation, and Juan Salgado, the Chancellor of City Colleges of Chicago. It is a rare opportunity, I think, to hear from experts in the field about the work of community college in producing alumni outcomes and student perspectives on their experiences, their motivations for attending, and the outcomes that they achieve beyond the community college. Just a couple of housekeeping notes as we get started today. Please, as you listen, use the chat function if you have thoughts or observations or questions as we go along. And there's a team from Strada who will be watching the chat function and responding. You're also very welcome to use the Q&A function if you'd like to submit a question for a panelist or for any panelist to comment or respond. So please do be active. We will save time at the end for some live discussion, and we very, very much welcome your perspectives, your insights, and your questions. So with that, we'll begin. Nichole will begin with a presentation of the research results.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruth. And thank you to our panelists and everyone who's joining us today. So I want to start off with just a little bit about why we were motivated to do this study and how we went about it. As Ruth mentioned, community colleges are such a priority. They are a pathway to opportunity for so many students. But at the same time, we were finding, especially when working with our community college partners, that there's really a gap in the existing data in terms of our understanding about the full experiences of community college students. We know that they are diverse in their goals, from seeking degrees to certificates to transfer to four-year institutions, and that they have a wide range of motivations, whether it's personal motivations, enrichment, career seeking, community-related motivations. And so we really wanted to conduct a study that would get at this whole range of motivations and experiences of these students. So we were really fortunate to be able to partner with some great community college leaders across the country. You'll see their names there: Dallas, Honolulu, Ivy Tech, Northern Virginia Community College, and Rio Salgado, in order to help us design this study and really inform us what would be useful information for community colleges to understand about their graduates. And so they helped us to put together the questions and design the study. And you'll see, we'll go through some of these different findings on motivations and experiences and benefits. I do want to highlight these data that you'll see here are nationally representative. So it's not data from the schools in that first bullet point who helped design the survey. They did their own studies, and some of them are probably joining us here in the audience, so welcome if you're here. But these data are the nationally representative sample, and it includes people who attended a community college in the past 10 years and are not currently enrolled. So you'll note it's not just graduates, because we know again that community college students may not have been seeking a degree. So it's all those alumni and with a wide range of experiences. And this was conducted in partnership with NORC at the University of Chicago. We're happy to answer more questions about that methodology. But right now we want to get into the findings. What did we find? And there's going to be basically three sections of this. So first of all, we're going to talk about the motivations and goals of community college students. We're going to talk about the value that they report from their experience. And finally, we're going to do a deep dive on skill development, because we found a particular link between the skills that students reported developing and then the value that they find. So our first section is really looking at what are community college students looking for. And as I mentioned, we found not every community college student was seeking an associate degree, right? And of course, these are recent students who are looking back and reporting what their goal was. So it's a little bit different than when you do a survey of incoming students. But we found that about a third of these students said that they had been seeking an associate degree. And many of them were seeking more than one thing. You'll see this adds up to certainly more than 100%, because many are seeking multiple experiences from their community college experience. And so why are we asking this? One of the reasons was we think it's important when we're looking at attainment numbers to look at it with a little bit more perspective and understanding of the diverse goals that community college students have. So from there, we went on to ask them, what did they in fact complete at community college? And so you'll see here, this was in our sample, about 1 in 3 of these students had completed an associate degree, 29%, those dark navy bars there. 28% of the students had transferred on to a 4-year institution, and 24% of the students had earned a certificate. But then the green is what percent had completed among students who had identified that as their goal. And so you'll see that even though, each of these is about 1 in 3, and again, they're not mutually exclusive, the majority of students did report that they completed what they had been seeking from a community college. It's still not 100, so there's room for growth, but it just helps us maybe take a little bit different perspective or lens on how should we understand success when we're looking at it really from a student's point of view. What are they seeking from a community college? So on that note, we wanted to understand not only what is the degree or certificate that they're seeking, but why? What is the motivation for getting that degree or for seeking to transfer to a four-year institution. And so we dug a little deeper to understand their motivations. And here you'll see all the different motivations. We actually started, this was kind of a multi-step research project. We've been doing this over a few years with four-year institutions as well. And it's come from focus groups where we had more open conversations about all the different kinds of motivations, and then boiled them down to these on the survey. And so what you'll see here, they group into three different factors. The first, the green bars, are work-related motivations. And so these, you can see students, recent students who are saying that they were motivated to, for example, gain skills for work, to support themselves and their families, to advance their career, or to make more money. And so that group of career-related motivations was the most common among all of our respondents. Many of these students selected multiple things. I think the average was maybe 7. So a lot of students, it's not just one thing that they're looking for. They're looking for a multidimensional experience from community college. You can see the middle group there is more of those personal factors about learning and developing themselves, becoming a role model. And then there were also a lot of community-related motivations. We know a lot of these are first-generation students, and so they're thinking about how can they help their community, help future generations, make their family and other people proud of them. And so those are also important to many of the students. And the next slide is going to then show how many students actually felt that those motivations were fulfilled. So what you'll see here, the light bar is just taking those motivations from the previous slide, how many students said that that was an important motivation to them. And then here where it's filled in is the percent who actually said that their community college experience helped them to accomplish these things, to gain skills, to be successful in work, to support themselves and their families, and so on. And so what we found here is that while these career-related aspirations were most frequently cited, they were also least likely to be fulfilled. So the amount of that bar that's shaded is lower compared to these others. We see only about half of the students who cited these as important motivations are also reporting that their community college experience actually helped them to do those things, to fulfill those goals they had for their career. So this is where we want to really have a conversation today about what are some of the practices that these leaders who are joining us have seen in their experience that can really help to advance the career motivations, help the students to fulfill those motivations. So our next section, we're going to get into the outcomes. What is the value that students were finding from community college? And we look at this both subjectively in terms of students saying it was worth the cost or they achieved their goals, as well as earnings. We look at earnings outcomes. So first of all, here we just break it out by different attainment levels. And you'll see on the left, this is a comparison with a study that we did last year with bachelor's degree completers. And there's 2 different subjective measures of value here. You'll see the light blue is, they say my education was worth the cost. And then the dark blue is my education helped me to achieve my goals. So what's really striking to me here is that it's very similar what you see between the bachelor's degree completers and the associate completers, as well as those students who didn't complete an associate, but they transferred to a 4-year institution. So here we see really our recent community college students have very strong value perceptions. And it's really similar to that of the bachelor's degree completers. We see a bit lower value perceptions among those community college attendees who completed a certificate, but not an associate degree or transfer, or who just took courses. So we know everyone has different goals for what they're trying to get out of their education, but we do find that students are reporting the strongest value when they do attain that degree, or they are able to transfer to a 4-year institution. The other thing that we find is that there's a really strong tie with earnings. And so here we broke down those 2 subjective measures. This education helped me achieve my goals, and the education was worth the cost. And we looked at them by income quartile. And so what you'll see, the median income among our community college respondents was $48,000. And so the dark green bars are those who are earning more The darkest green is that highest quartile, more than 75,000, and so on. And then the yellow bars are those who are earning less than that median. And you can see a pretty big difference in the value that they report if they're above or below that median income line. So students who are earning more are much more likely to say that they achieved their goals and that their education was worth the cost. What's also interesting to me is that it's not a linear pattern in that it doesn't, the value perceptions don't increase at a steady rate when you earn more and more money. And so it seems more like a threshold of a certain amount, makes students really feel that their education was worth it, but it doesn't necessarily mean, they're seeking to maximize income, but they're seeking to earn at least enough to, take care of their family, to have a stable income. And so this is something that, we're seeing actually as a pattern across our research, and, will be important to think about as we're understanding the value of education and how we might look at that through some kind of lens about economic success. Another thing that we find is that there are differences among different demographic groups in terms of who's meeting that earnings threshold. And so here you'll see about 58% of the respondents who are white report meeting that earnings threshold in the survey. For Latinos, it's 47%, and for Black respondents, it was only 35%. This is really striking when we're thinking about who community colleges serve and how they're seeking to be really powerful engines of economic mobility for their students. And so we know that there are all kinds of factors outside the control of community colleges and that play into earnings disparities. But also another thing that we're hoping to get into and discuss with our panels are some of the things that can be done at the community college level to connect students to the skills they need and the high earnings, high opportunity pathways to try to mitigate and mediate some of these earnings disparities that we see. All right, so the last section here is looking at one of the factors that we found to be really strongly linked to higher value perceptions. So we know earnings are linked to higher value perceptions, completion is linked to higher value perceptions. And then the other thing we found was the extent to which students say they develop certain key skills. This was also another common finding between this study and the study of four-year degrees, recent bachelor's degree completers. So we looked at a number of different skills and did some statistical analysis to group them into these clusters. So you'll see the first one, we're calling it synthesis, but it's really communication, critical thinking, leadership, ability to learn new things, those kind of durable, flexible skills. The middle one has to do with people skills. So networking, cultural awareness, teamwork, creativity, all those kind of collaborative skills. The last group there is more, we're calling analytic skills. So things like data analysis, digital literacy, project management, quantitative skills. And what you'll see on the next couple slides are the really strong links between the extent to which students felt they developed these skills and then those value perceptions. So we've got just two slides on this. The first one is that question of my education was worth the cost. And so you can see across the bottom, we are averaging the student rating of the extent to which they developed each of these types of skills. And so we averaged across the skills in those groups. So when students have a really low rating of the extent to which they develop skills, then they're over on that left side. They're very unlikely to say that their education was worth the cost. Whereas students who have really strong identification of developing those skills, they're up there 85%, 84%, 83%, saying my education was worth the cost. Really strong link. You'll see almost the same thing on the next one, which is that question of my education helped me to achieve my goals. And for those with low ratings of those skill development, it's really unlikely to say that they achieve their goals compared to really high for students with strong ratings of their skill development. And the last thing I'll share with you on this, so now, the question is, okay, how are we doing? How are community colleges doing in helping students to develop these skills? And unfortunately, not quite as well as, we would aspire to. And so what we see here, you can see the different groups of skills, and these are the extent to which students felt that they developed these skills in community college. And so you can see, it varies by skill. The strongest there is the ability to learn new things, but then, there's kind of a drop off for some of these other skills. And so here's another area where I think it would be great. This is a research opportunity, and this is an opportunity for those of our panelists and others with expertise on how to both embed these really critical skills into the education and co-curricular activities, as well as how to make students aware and recognize the development of certain skills, because sometimes we know that they are in fact being embedded, and a student may not really realize that the project that they're working on, relates to the skill that can be applied in a different way. So, how can we help to communicate that to students so that they know how to apply the skills that they're learning in future career settings? So just to kind of sum up the key findings across this report, first one is these community college students have really diverse goals. They have many reasons for attending and many different kinds of motivation. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all experience. And a lot of them, especially if they're the first ones in their families to attend college, they really need some coaching and guidance. And so we think that personalized coaching and guidance and information can be really critical to help students draw that line between where they're seeking to go and how they need to get there in their education. The second one is we see the power of that earnings threshold, that really is linked to these value perceptions, not that it has to be maximized, but that there's a certain level at which it's really important for students to, at least achieve that threshold. And so I think there really needs to be more transparency and, better data infrastructure to make these earnings and employment outcomes known and visible to students as they're making their choices, and counselors and coaches, state policymakers, so that everybody has that data and that awareness, and they can see what are the different employment outcomes for our students, and how do they vary across different pathways, different fields of study. The last one is also related. So we see the strength of skill development and the importance of these career motivations, for students. And so how can institutions really ensure that they are embedding the key skills and opening access to pathways and fields of study that are offering high opportunities and, high earnings pathways for our community college students? So with that, I am very excited to turn it over to Ruth and to our three illustrious panelists to have more discussion about how we can put some of these findings into practice.
Nichole, thank you so much. There is a lively conversation going on in chat and in the Q&A. So if you have questions for panelists, please do use the Q&A function and enter them, and we will respond to them. And really appreciate the report and the synthesis very much, Nichole. Lots of questions about accessing the report. It is available. The link has been placed in the chat, and we will be sure that you receive it also. So panelists, we know community colleges are vital pathways to opportunity in America. Accessible, affordable, local, regional, really crucial element of America's post-secondary education system. What's one thing, just a rapid fire question for each of you, that you wish everyone in America knew and understood about community colleges? Pascale, let's start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Such a pleasure to be with all of you to have this conversation. I think it's important to know that these students still believe in the American dream. It may not be the same dream that existed 10, 20, 30 years ago, but that same sense of hope and optimism that their lives can be changed by attending our institutions. It's very real, and it comes with a significant amount of responsibility that we all should embrace. And this report can help us to do just that.
Eloy.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Ruth and Strada, for inviting me. So I will answer that quickly, but in three parts. Community colleges serve the top 100% of people in their community. They are the closest to what's going on in that community. They are a hotbed of diverse talent, and community colleges touch just about everyone in that community. So it's a wonderful place to think about how to change communities, change states, and change this country.
Thank you. And thank you both. And Juan, to you.
Well, thank you to everybody for being here, and Ruth and Strada for the invitation. Look, our students are exceptional. They're exceptionally talented. You know, they excel in relevant and rigorous college courses while they're managing very complex lives with multiple job and life responsibilities. And so it's real simple. They're assets you don't want to miss out on. You don't want to miss out on your workplaces. You don't want to miss out on them in your universities. You've got to really tap into that. And by the way, our faculty and staff are equally diverse and talented and experienced in their fields. And so the combination of those two makes us, you know, exceptionally talented and diverse institutions, both students, faculty.
Very well said. And what a great grounding for this conversation. So as you read this report, you three experts, what do you see as the most important insight? Perhaps it's the biggest surprise. Maybe it's the insight that you think, wow, that really helps me and informs me as I proceed in my work. And maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. And Juan, let you start.
So what jumped out at me was this 72% that said they completed the highest level of education they were seeking at community college. And in some ways, it validates what we hear and know from our students. In other ways, it screams for more insight, you know, to understand that better, right? Also, you know, given the income threshold that you spoke about, and the work that we have to do in making sure that we're delivering more of those transferable skills to our students. And so, I think that, it is an opportunity point for us from an asset-based perspective to say, this is what our students are saying. Let's understand it much better, right? And then let's try to deliver more of that. I also want to make sure that we're helping our students to aspire to their highest level of capability. I want to make sure that in our processes, we're making sure they can see themselves at a bigger and better future than maybe they even imagine for themselves now.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Very, very well said. So we're going to call out remarkable attainment of what individuals came for, and the opportunity to do more, to raise aspirations and to continue this work. And also, I want to call out on what you said there, Juan. We don't know everything we'd like to know about outcomes for community college students. This is an area that has one report brings up as many questions as it answers. So, Eloy, what do you think?
Well, first of all, those of us who have been raised on community college campuses, a lot of this is not a surprise. It's what we see every day on a college campus. And it's a reminder that the completion metrics that we are used to talking about in four-year institution settings really don't apply exactly to a community college setting, because students are coming to a community college for all sorts of different reasons, and they aspire to different things, most of which are tied to economic mobility. And in the different avenues that they can get there, whether it's transfer, whether it's an associate's degree, a credential, whether it's just learning English as a new language so that they can get a job. So we have to think differently about how we describe success to community colleges, really embed the desire that students are seeking, which is upward mobility, and begin to really value community colleges for what they do, not how we think that they should be doing it, but what they actually do day to day, and the value that the actual learners are seeking. So I think that's sort of the insight and the reminder to all of us that we need to really start thinking differently about what success means in community colleges.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to that in just a second. Pascale, I want to give you a chance to comment there.
Sure, and I'd love to take the conversation to really center the student, and what elevated for me is the fact that our students are consumers. They have power and they have agency. And inside of the fact that they have their motivations and their desires, they also have choices they can make. They can metaphorically swipe left, right? Should they feel as if their needs are not being met? And when we think about the culture we have with Amazon and Uber and all the ways as a consumer, one can customize and get needs met with immediacy, I think this report invites us to be reminded that our students have a significant amount of agency throughout the process where we can co-create with them in ways that can be impactful, but there's also an opportunity to leverage that agency to help them achieve their goals.
Excellent. Very well said. And maybe I just bring Nichole into the conversation for a second. And Nichole, if I asked you that question, what surprised you most about the findings of the report, or what do you think was the most important takeaway from your perspective as a researcher?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was most interested in this question of what percentage of students do complete what they are seeking, because that's been the thing that we've heard from community colleges all along, is that they're not exactly being measured according to, the goals that the students had. So I was interested in that, as well as just the parallels that we saw with the four-year institutions, seeing the really similar overall value perceptions and then the similar link between skills and value perceptions. I think, it's encouraging, I guess, to see across, different studies and in different populations still that there's some consistent things that we can do to help students see that value.
Great. Thank you so much. So now let's dig in a little bit more. Let's go to, I think, some of the heart of the matter. Eloy, you got us started and said, when we measure success, we need to think about measuring and understanding economic mobility and the tangible sort of career outcomes. I would note that there are some comments in the Q&A about whether Suzanne, I believe, asked a question, and I love how many people are here from all over the country. This is great, and your questions are great. So thank you. So Suzanne asked a question that was, do we know the delta? Do we know pre-post earnings? And really that is getting at the heart of the matter, right? If we want to better understand what community colleges are doing and what alumni experience is, we'd love to be able to say that. I don't believe we actually do know that. Do we, Nichole?
We actually did ask that question. We looked a little bit at that. I think we didn't have as much data on it because not everybody answered both of them. But it was interesting. There was still more of a link, I think, between earning sort of that threshold than there was. I think there's a variety of circumstances under which, those deltas could be different depending on the life circumstances of a student. But
great. Well, thank you. And I think as we return to that question of economic mobility and career being one of the shared features for why individuals pursue education and training beyond high school, whether through a community college, a credential program, or a four-year degree, that does seem to sort of hit at the heart of the matter. When you think about measuring success, what do you want to put at the top of the list? So we're on the economic mobility focus. Is there anything we haven't surfaced about measuring success and that you three experienced panelists would want to put into the conversation?
Well, I would, oh, sorry, Eloy, we're going to go. Yeah. I think there's a few things in addition to the economic mobility, and we would look at mobility, literally from the fact that our students move in up, quintiles, multiple quintiles, right? As Raj Chetty has been doing through his Opportunity Insights work. But we're also looking at Net Promoter Score. To what degree are students out there really being promoters of our institution? And look, the data is also showing, while completion is not everything, it is critically important. And so we need to stay focused on completion, stay focused on transfer, while we ensure that it's not just about completion and transfer. It is literally, we have a responsibility for ensuring that our students have meaningful connectedness to the career in which they are going to enter now, not later, while they're studying, rather than after they're studying. That's through work-based learning and other career-connected opportunities, and especially for an institution like ours that is 75% Pell eligible, 75% Black and Latinx, in a city that is becoming more of the city of haves and have-nots, right? So we have a direct responsibility there.
Thank you so much, Juan, for putting that on the table. And there are a number of comments and questions in the chat and in the Q&A asking about the relationship between work and learn programs, between apprenticeships, between work-based learning, and individuals achieving what they came for, having their motivations fulfilled. So maybe we ought to just ask everybody to comment on that. You brought it up, Juan, and Pascale, would you want to make a comment on that, and Eloy as well? I think this is quite important as we think, what can we do to ensure I can see what I want to be, I'm experiencing this, I'm getting a pathway to job and career that opens that door. So Pascale, go ahead.
Sure. We've just started a project called Unlocking Opportunity, where we are working with 10 colleges to study these questions within a 3-year period. And the idea is to understand who has access to which programs, whether or not the programs are aligned with the regional workforce needs. Do we even know in the communities what the living wage standards are? And by getting at this information and then looking at whether the systems are equipped to provide the right pipeline of students to reach those jobs, and where are there leaks in the pipeline? Are we giving students enough exposure? Are we giving them enough information in real time to make decisions? And where is it breaking down inside of the systems? Because in this conversation, we're not really saying anything we haven't said before or that you're not aware of. The problem is when we look at the numbers, it's exactly what we saw, especially with Black and Latinx students. It's not reaching the same populations at the same levels. And so I think it's to answer the question, there's a conversation around access and equity in terms of performance within these programs. And when we think about whether there are sufficient supports and sufficient opportunities, very often there are constraints with equipment. We talked about offline accrediting bodies that can get in the way. And it's so important for us to name and identify the barriers that are particularly impacting those populations that have been historically marginalized. But it will only take starting with those motivations to differentiate the assumptions that we're bringing to this work that haven't allowed us, Ruth, to identify what those barriers have been historically so that we can avoid replicating them. We have a whole new generation of presidents that have started in the last few years. We have an opportunity to really change the game by centering these student motivations in the approach that we take.
That was a great call to action, I would say. We can change the game. Eloy, how would you want to change the game?
Well, I'm going to, add my 2 cents on top of what Pascale just mentioned, which is centering the student, centering the learner. What do they want? And asking that question, not what we want for them always, but what do they want? And beginning from that point of view. And also, I've seen lots of questions in the chat about apprenticeships versus other learn and earn opportunities. That's what community colleges do. That's how we should be thinking about measuring their success, is giving the learner the opportunity to engage in the direction that they want to go, whatever that direction is, and giving them the tools that they need. Beyond that, I would say this, that we've fallen into the trap that higher education has given us over the centuries, which is we overcomplicate everything and we create pathways that are unnavigable for first-generation learners. We have to understand the information that they have in front of them. We have to increase the information they have access to. Think about, particularly with apprenticeships, particularly with earn and learn opportunities, low-income learners of color are in communities where there are not a lot of employers. Unless you're going to go apprentice at the check cashing location down the street, we can talk about aspirations all we want, but the employers have to actually show up and give these individuals the opportunity to engage and earn and learn. So our role is to bring those constituents together to make sure that we are giving students the pathways that they're seeking, and not just the pathways that are in front of them, but the pathways that they may not be aware of. I mean, I just think about the computer science pathway. It's no secret that if you get into undergraduate and graduate programs at a university in computer science, there are very few students of color. Why is that? So I think we need to continue to break down these issues and make sure that learners have the information that they need upfront, build the networks that they don't have, and help them get into the fields where they are going to earn not just livable wages, but wages that their talent deserves.
Ruth, the only thing I want to add to that briefly, because this is very strong, is that we've got to shift from serving the labor market to altering the labor market. We have a role in community colleges to alter the labor market, to get out there and make sure employers understand that they can hire our students without a bachelor's degree and grow the talent from within, right? They can have access to a diverse set of people that, they're throwing up their hands saying, where do we find these folks? Well, guess what? We have them, all right? That's not so hard to do. Growing them together is what we ought to be doing. How do we go about doing that? So community colleges as institutions that alter the labor market is the direction we need to go.
This is such a fabulous conversation. I have to say, your comments really support each other and really feed off each other. This idea of both supporting and addressing the labor market and altering it as in community colleges support, serve, engage, and produce the talent for America. So well said, well said. I think maybe we ought to just loop back to something a little bit. I'm reading comments and chat and questions kind of all at the same time. And there are a few threads to pick up on. One of them is the 20 percentage point gap in first generation students report on their value of their experiences. So across attainment levels, whether you achieved the associate's degree, you transferred, or were a certificate student, that gap is there for the perceptions of the first generation student. So is there anything else? You've talked about several things, from work and learn programs and apprenticeships and building social capital and pathways in, and coaching and guidance. Pascale touched on this, towards the programs that deliver outcomes. Is there anything else from a design perspective or other things that you would want to put a point on that we ought to think about for first generation students at our institutions?
I just want to add and piggyback on what's been said, the critical role that advisement plays and how important it is, especially given Eloy's emphasis on what's important, that those advisors have that information regarding where the jobs are and the information students need in order to make those choices. And we see examples in excellent community colleges like Lorraine Community College that's developed a system of career by design where they are working with industry, to Juan's point, to co-create the regional needs. And that information is given to the advisors through training, and that training is then filtered down to the students. And so there are systematic approaches that can come through partnerships that remain not only in communication, but continue to use data to inform the conversations and to ensure there is access and equity along that pipeline. But advisement is a key element, and it aligns with the coaching finding that you uncovered that is critical and essential, I would say, to these students finding a sense of place at these institutions and partners to help them navigate these choices.
Indeed. It would be wonderful to know, as part of this report, how many students at 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions say they got that kind of coaching and guidance? Wouldn't that be helpful for us? And to try to figure out how we can provide that much more ubiquitously to everyone. Is there anything else anybody wants to jump in on that we haven't discussed about the first generation college student who there's also some great comments in the chat. One of them is really quite powerful, that entry level is no longer entry level. Everywhere you go, people want experience, and whether a 2 or 4-year degree. So that does seem to be that building those connections, social capital, and that work-based experience is pretty important. So Eloy, you look like you're leaning forward, so go ahead.
I would just say 2 things, because we could talk about this particular issue all day, but 2 things. One is we as educators have a responsibility to streamline the pathways to these jobs. That's our role, and that's part of the dissatisfaction you see. In many places, we're still putting students through 3 and 4 semesters of remedial education. How in the world are they going to be satisfied with sitting around for 3 to 4 semesters in remedial education before they even start talking about a career? We still, in some places, use standardized placement exams to place students, even though they successfully completed high school courses that prepare them for college. So we do a lot of things that undermine the satisfaction of learners that have no material effect on their success going forward. And then the second thing I'll say, to Juan's point earlier, is we have a lot of employers who talk about hiring on skills, but still use pedigree to hire. And we need to move away from that. We need to better translate and articulate learning to skills and skills to hiring. I think the Tear the Paper Ceiling initiative is something that we should all be paying attention to and working to move away from pedigree and move into skills-based hiring.
The only thing I'd like to add, Ruth, is we need to continually support students more. That is advising, but it's a whole host of other support services for those students, particularly our first generation students in particular. And so that's not just tutoring. We're partnering with a group called 1 Million Degrees that provides a coach for every 60 students. And so plus a mentor that comes from the corporate or civic environment so that they build those networks. And so those additive stuff and mental health supports, they really do make a difference for first generation students and all students.
Thank you so much. And I think 1 coach for every 60 students, how remarkable. And the mentoring element and the mental health element. That's very concrete in terms of support for students who don't have the social capital necessarily or the network to open those doors. So very, very great comments. I think we should maybe take a minute, since Eloy mentioned it, and it's come up in a lot of these conversations about skills. So we see it in this report. Students' perception of the skills they have and the skills they gain really is related to the perception of the value of their experience. So there's a relationship between these variables. How do you think we help more students gain crucial skills and or recognize the skills they bring, and they have as incredible assets throughout their life, but be able to recognize and articulate those as they think about where they are and where they go in the world? So I want to talk a little bit about skills, and then of course put an exclamation point on the right now. My observations of the field are the sort of skills-based hiring is much more rhetoric than it is action. So we probably should talk about both how we help students recognize and attain those skills, and also how we influence hiring, as kind of back to Juan's point. So let me let you pick up on the skills conversation a bit. Any surprises in there? Any innovative practices that you've seen that in terms of supporting crucial skill development and or recognizing skills that students have and bring?
Well, I'll jump in and just say, we do a terrible job of capturing the skills that learners bring to the table from day one. I mean, I'm former military. I had lots of skills that I walked into a community college with, and there was no way to articulate those. So I got no credit for them. We have learners that work every day been working since they were age 15. They come with a variety of skills. They take non-credit courses that don't articulate the credit. I mean, just how ridiculous is this? We are teaching learners skills, but we determine, the educators, whether they can have credit for that or not. I mean, that's just plain dumb. So I think we need to clean our side of the street and make sure that we're doing the best that we can to identify skills, to give credit for skills that are mastered and obtained in a college, whether credit, non-credit, non-for-credit, whatever you call it, and give them the ability to articulate that to an employer. Learning is learning. We shouldn't own the unit of credit for learning and guard it like, our lives depend on it. We need to give individuals credit for the learning that they obtain and allow them to articulate it.
Yeah, that's fabulously said, I have to say. And as someone who's leading an institution today, it's Eloy's message is a challenge to us all, that we have to meet the moment in that regard. But we also have to shift to, an asset-based approach to actually achieve that. When a student arrives to our door, we've got to be in a coaching stance, right? And you start with, all the assets that that human being has, and you build from there, and you recognize those particular assets, and you help that human being to recognize those assets themselves. And so, our faculty, our staff, we all have to do a better job of becoming coaches, guiders, and folks that are really seeing the assets that each of our students already have, and then recognizing them.
I agree with what's already been said, and would love to offer sort of a companion piece, which is that the leadership in the institutions matter. These are really complex questions we're asking that take time, and that take an investment of resources, and that take certain skills that may or may not be in abundance because we're meeting a different moment. And the leadership of the college, our policymakers, leadership really, really matters in this conversation. And we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that people are spending less time in the presidency. And so if the tenure of time in the presidency is reduced and these complex challenges take more time to solve, we've got to start thinking about how do we continue this work so that we're improving outcomes at scale, because otherwise you sort of get these really short initiatives where just a handful of students, which is great, right? More is better than less, but the complexity and the scale of these problems require us to consider what kind of infrastructure support do we need for boards, for example, to continue the work if there are transitions in presidencies, to invest in presidents to be able to jump in and do this kind of work faster if their tenure is not going to be as long as it's been in the past, succession planning, building the pipeline. And while I am 100% student-centered, it's becoming equally clear we got to take care of our leaders as well to ensure the institutions being disrupted can continue the work in order to provide transformation inside of communities.
There are just amazing comments here today from you three leaders, also through our chat and through questions. I think there are several pretty interesting themes in there. One of them, I think that's a good one to pick up on. And to your comment there, Pascale, I would say also, it probably means that institutional leadership should have a team that can keep moving things forward. Leaders come and leaders go. The work remains, the institutions remain. So a way to have a broader plan and impact is probably pretty important for some of these very major shifts in approach to happen and really take root and become the norm. There was an interesting question that someone asked about when we look at outcomes, both students, in this case, they're reporting their experience and their outcomes and were their goals met. There's also a question in the chat about state data systems and whether state data systems can be modernized to actually help institutions know what happens to their students, to their alumni after they leave. So I wanted to let you three comment on that, because there's probably a big need for us to have a better understanding of all of our students and their experiences within and beyond. So I wanted to ask you about that, your own experiences with data systems, and what kind of recommendations you would have for more clear, transparent, open, and available information about your students beyond your institutions.
I'll just say we're working right now with the University of Chicago Inclusive Economy Lab to help us to transform the state data systems into something that we can actually utilize for longitudinal analysis of how well our students are doing with economic mobility over time, at least for those that stay within the state of Illinois. And so I think there's some promise there, but we got to have partners to actually execute that have the capacity that we just don't have at the community college level right now from a research standpoint.
I think that the challenge with state metrics just tend to be the lag time in when you get the data and how useful the data can be. And it tends to inspire a compliance mindset. And so to that end, I think, again, leaning in on the institutions agency piece, an equally important question is how are we training up those who manage the data to use it more effectively to advance the vision and the goals of the institution? In this sense, I'm a little bit cynical. I'm not 100% persuaded that the state will be able to provide what is needed in the period of time that it's needed. But I do believe with the right long game vision, with the right talent on your team, that data can be mined effectively. But the key, things are changing too quickly, Ruth. I mean, that is the problem, that the world is changing too quickly. The needs are changing too quickly. And unless those systems can be more agile, I'm just not sure how valuable they can be to change forward-facing outcomes.
Yeah, I just quickly add, I think, California is trying to develop a cradle to career data system. I think it's important. I think states need data. I agree with Pascale that for some of the issues that leaders deal with, that data is not going to be responsive to the needs on the ground. It may be responsive to long-term planning at state policy levels, but not on the ground. I think the more that we can make our data open and available to researchers, to third-party intermediaries, to a marketplace that then uses that data to better inform learners and better inform institutional leaders. We have a history in institutions of higher ed. We protect our data because we don't want people to criticize us. The more criticism that we can muster, the better we're going to be. So I think just making the data as open and available as possible and let other third-party intermediaries use that data to find better solutions than we will come up with in our own institutions.
Very, very well said. And I must say, today's discussion has been spectacular. There are so many great questions and comments, lots on employers that we didn't really get to today, but we will in the future. And I want to say, as we wrap, remarkable panelists today, leaders in community colleges, individuals who have brought to life community colleges as a pathway to opportunity. I want to express my great appreciation to our three panelists, to Nichole for her work and her report, and to every one of you, clearly people who are out there in the field making a difference for students at community colleges. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today on this webinar, and best wishes to everyone. The work really matters. I am grateful to all of you for advancing it. Thank you so much.